If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. Nikola Tesla.
Welcome to the Frequency Shifter Show. I'm your host, Corene Summers, founder of Artisan Farmacy. In this show, we explore ways to raise the frequency of ourselves, one another, and our planet. We're digging deep into all things metaphysical, from what is frequency to the power of sound, the Schumann resonance, our DNA, Reiki, the energy of water, and beyond, all to shift our minds and bodies back into alignment with richer states of connection, elevated awareness, and maximum human potential. And we're bringing on the global experts and thought leaders to share their wisdom as they let us pick their brains around all these juicy, mysterious topics.
First of all, I don't know who Ricky is, and metaphysical, Schumann's Renaissance. I don't even know. What are you talking about? Wait a minute. I need us to take a step back and calm down. What are we even talking about here?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I have a co-host. The universe insisted, what can I say? This is Alex Terranova, founder of DreamMason. He's sort of a newbie to some of this frequency stuff, and he's going to help keep everything balanced, grounded, and relatable.
So this show isn't just for the experts to nerd out on all things metaphysical, but it's an open, welcome space for everyone to explore the mysteries of the universe and raise our frequencies together.
I was so pumped about this episode. I'd been trying to get somebody on the show for a long time to talk about the megalithic sites around the world and tie us back to some of the prehistoric ancient wisdom. And Derek Olson was the perfect person to do just that. Alex has called him the modern day Indiana Jones, which could not be, that's just spot on. He combined his love for ancient history with, as he says, his ability to think critically, and led him on an investigative journey into the prehistoric past. So his goal when launching his company, Megalithic Marvels, platform in 2016 was to kind of reconstruct the prehistoric past and educate people, bring awareness around alternative history and some of the really cool things found at these ancient sites that he visits. He had just gotten back from Egypt when he came on our show.
He sent me down such a rabbit hole. I actually ordered books after we recorded this episode based on people he talks about, where I was like, I need to know more. It's way harder to read about these things than you would expect. Like, having him explain it was so much more interesting and fun than actually picking up some of the books that I got, which I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can read this. But that's such a testament to him. Like, he took these like really complex topics about ancient Egypt and the pyramids and sound and energy and
megalithic architecture and lost technologies.
Yeah, and he makes it really, again, we've had a lot of people on this show that make things that are very complex, very digestible, and he's another one. And that whole Indiana Jones thing is there's like fun and adventure to what he's up to. On this episode, again, we talk about pyramids, we talk about dynastic Egyptians, and did they or did they not build the pyramids? I think that was like the first question we asked him. We talk about the frequency of sound. There's pieces in this episode where he talks about like recharging chambers almost for humans, which was pretty interesting. We talk about the connections between the pyramids in South America and in Egypt. We talk about how he lets us in on why there's evidence to show that these things couldn't have been done the way we've kind of been told, and that there has to be another story to this, which I thought was really interesting. The weights, where the stones came from, some of that stuff was like, wait, I was like, I had to know more.
Just prepare to have your mind blown. That's all we'll say.
and you're gonna have to follow him. Like, I had to start following him online because I needed to see the things he was talking about with my own eyes.
His videos are so good, aren't they? He's one of my favorite people to follow on social media.
I'm curious, what did he tell us about frequency shifters?
Another simple but so spot on, beautiful statement about frequency. It's wisdom and enlightenment that changes one's state of mind. So again, it's that idea of changing, or the ability to change or shift your own state of being.
Cool. Let's jump right in. Derek, the first thing I have to ask you about is, based on your expertise and where you come from, like, do you think man built the pyramids?
Coming right out of the gate with a hot one.
Wow.
I mean, it's like simple.
Tell me aliens. Tell me aliens.
No, just like, yeah, I mean, is this like Stargate? Did aliens bring humans here from another place to like make us their slaves? Like, what do you in your research and what you've found and what you've done, like, what do you think?
Yeah, wow, great question. Question I get a lot. It's I would say, let me start by saying this. I do not believe that for sure the dynastic Egyptians of 3,500 years ago built the pyramids. I can emphatically say that with confidence, because that's what mainstream history, mainstream Egyptology tells us, is that, hey, the pharaonic dynasties, or again, as I refer to them, the dynastic Egyptians of 3,500 years ago or so, built these pyramids as tombs. You got the king's chamber for the king pharaoh, the queen's chamber for the queen pharaoh, and the Great Pyramid, and there's nothing more to it. And they refer to the period before the dynastic Egyptians as the pre-dynastic period, where they basically tell us it was just a bunch of primitive people wandering around for thousands of years. But unlike the confirmed Egyptian tombs in the Valley of the Kings, no hieroglyphs, no mummies, no Egyptian artwork depictions have ever been found on the bare megalithic walls inside the Great Pyramids. And it's surprising how many people still don't quite fathom that or realize that. No king mummy was ever found in the so-called king's chamber. No queen mummy was ever found in the so-called queen's chamber of the Great Pyramid. And so I think we're looking at something far more ancient. I think we're looking, dynastic Egypt, as we know, goes back to about 3000 BC. But I think what we see was a legacy of an earlier cycle of civilization that goes back probably to the end of the last ice age, 9,700 BC. So it's hard for me to believe that just humans with ropes and pulleys built that. It's not hard for me to believe. I don't believe it. And I certainly don't believe that, slaves of a couple thousand years ago built the pyramid. So I guess that's my answer for now, but we can get into some of this deeper as we move through the show.
Well, I have a follow-up question, because this is something that I came across that I've been really interested in lately, but I can't find, the internet is just such, it's so difficult these days with the way the search engines are censored, and finding information has become so difficult. But that frequency of sound was one of the things that possibly could have been used to elevate these big rocks and boulders without man and, the actual like physics of having to carry them, that it was using something, a finer, lighter, different type of frequency.
Yeah, I mean, many great researchers have laid out how there's basically a global power grid system. And I'll just say this to kind of set up my answer to your question. And this power grid system, it's kind of in the shape of like maybe a dodecahedron, I think is the word, which is like a very complex geometry symbol. So if you imagine this symbol, it's then kind of sliced into sections. And it's crazy when you look at where the Giza pyramids sit, they basically represent the center of this grid system over the earth that the ancients knew how to tap into and build these megalithic sites on. And so Chris Dunn, he's been pretty famous with his books on some alternative theories regarding the Great Pyramid and the Giza pyramids. He believes that the Great Pyramid was built to provide a highly technical society with energy. And so it's like a holistic energy type device that was harmonically coupling with the earth. And it's crazy when you go there and you go inside, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Nothing about this, again, looks like a tomb. This is very almost mechanical. And so what we see maybe is the earth is like the power source, and it's like the pyramid on this ley line is tapping in to the energy, and when it resonates with the earth, energy is drawn through it, and kind of once it's primed, it's like it becomes almost a coupled isolator, which then kind of when we get into the harmonics and the acoustics, it's like it's harmonically tuned, and draws energy from it. And so thousands of years ago, if we look at maps, it's the Nile River ran really close to the Great Pyramids. And so, and there's been studies done, documented studies, that hundreds of feet down under the Giza Plateau is tons of water. There's caves and there's chambers. And so it's likely that the pyramids, I think, were used as an energy structure to show kind of the relationship of interconnected chambers. And there's guys that have pointed out how if you get into the, I mean, there's just so much I can say. There was a study done. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was saying it's as above, so below, though, too, right? Like
Yeah.
they're connected to the water, but also to the sky. Aren't the pyramids in Giza, the shape of they match directly to the Orion's belt, as well as Stonehenge, I believe, and some of the other megalithic sites. I don't know them all from memory, but I know that many of them are direct matches to specific star systems. Orion is one that shows up several times, and that they are those basically energy machines and have the oscillators and use water and these. You're going to speak it way more eloquently than me, so I'm going to just stop.
No,
it wasn't a
you're
real
right
question.
on.
I'm just going to let you take it.
You're right on with the alignment of Orion. There's a lot of great research that you can find that says even, again, thousands upon thousands of years ago, they were even more directly aligned with Orion. But since the Earth is probably even tilted a little bit more. And then our tour guide, Mohammed Ibrahim, would be a great guy to have on your show as well. He's an Egyptologist, but he's really broken with the mainstream, and because he's thinking critically and he cannot deny the evidence of what he sees here. He even talks about how like the obelisks, like the obelisk at Karnak is so massive in scale. Every video and picture I took didn't even do it justice, but obelisks like this were operating like huge antennas essentially for cosmic rays that could then release energy upon this ancient city and civilization. And so it's likely that the pyramids were producing some kind of holistic energy. So you've got the pyramids, which we all know about. Then you've got these megalithic temples, which a lot of people don't know about. Then you got the obelisks, and then you've even got what could be considered like engines, which is like the Osirian of Abydos. It's this subterranean megalithic structure. And so you've got these different megalithic components, and it's likely that the pyramid was producing energy for the megalithic temples. This is where the ancients would come through for healing and fertility. So the pyramid, when you go inside it, it's not even functional. Even with the modern day wooden ramps they've put in there with steps, it is so hard to climb, and especially when you're descending, going 300 feet down into the subterranean chamber, you're bent over. It is so tough to walk. How in the world could they have done it if this was supposed to be a tomb, right? And they're carrying all their relics and their statues and and all the stuff for the burial. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. Again, when you can, in modern times, barely climb through this thing. And so again, to me, it's likely that these pyramids were kind of the main energy device powering these megalithic temples. If you Google, or listeners Google, the Valley Temple by the Sphinx, this is an incredible megalithic temple with the same blocks used for the pyramids, but you can see that its functionality is for whether it's humans or some kind of ancient beings to walk through this. And there's obelisks or almost like energy charging bases that were once in there. And Muhammad was explaining to us how, you'd pass through one end and you'd come out another end. And again, there's so much geology that plays into this with the different stones that activate energies. And so this is where the ancients were getting healing for fertility for their bodies. And then you've got these basically subterranean like engines. If you Google the Osirian of Abydos, underground structure that was probably almost like an engine that was then somehow connected underground. All over, it's reported that there's tunnels, massive megalithic tunnels by tour guides and guards. So these are all connected under the ground. And that was likely powering the pyramid in a sense. So it was a holistic, free energy type situation. I know I've said a lot, but those are some thoughts.
So let's look, I'm kind of like trying to think about like, so then how do we end up here? And all these things are now just right, like now they're Disneyland. It's like now they're just tours are going through them. What's your take on like, the humans or whatever they were, right? But that created these brilliant things. Do you have an idea of like what happened or how these things kind of just like died off and now we're, over here using a, electrical grid that we are plugged into a wall and it's, let's call it like not holistic?
Right. No, great question, Alex. And it's crazy because we're told today, again, by mainstream thought, academia, that we're the height of civilization, right? That we are the most evolved, highest tech that's ever existed. And
we have
really,
iPhones. We have
that
iPhones
couldn't.
coming.
Yeah, we've got iPhones, right? So we've arrived.
There are pictures of computers and different things that look like computers and phones, et cetera, in hieroglyphs, though, all over the world that have been found. They're not as popular, it seems, to
They didn't have apps.
talk about, but absolutely, we,
Yeah, and we even see some of that in some of the hieroglyphs in Egypt I can talk about. But yeah, so we're told basically that the further we look back in time, the more primitive it was, right? The further you look back, the more archaic the ancients were. Again, I don't believe that could be further from the truth. One trip to Egypt inside these megalithic temples and the Great Pyramid, if you have an open mind, you realize they had a greater technology than we have today. Our greatest technological achievements cannot replicate the Great Pyramid. We can't build it today. We still can't even figure out how they fully did this. And so, Alex, to answer your question, again, I'm pulling from a lot of great research from others like Muhammad Ibrahim and Robert Schoch, but it's likely that the power, if we're again thinking of the Great Pyramids and these megaliths as some kind of energy devices, it's likely that the engine, not the word I want to use, but the quote unquote engine was turned off and the energy began to slowly fade from these structures around 9,700 BC. Okay, so that talks about cataclysm here, right? And so I think, where was that? Okay, so again, Egyptology tells us that this stuff isn't that old, but when we look further back, I think we find out. So like the Sphinx is a great example. We're told by mainstream that this was just carved from the limestone bedrock, that Khafre, I think, built it around 2500 BC. But again, as Robert Schoch, the geologist, famously pointed out, the body of the Sphinx, on the body and on the walls of the enclosure, which I saw, there is super heavy rain erosion, right? And he concluded, and many others have confirmed this, that could have only been caused by water rainfall and water runoff. And if you look at the Sphinx, it sits on the edge of the Sahara Desert, and this region's been arid for like 5,000 years. And furthermore, various structures securely dated to the Old Kingdom show that erosion that was caused by the wind and sand is very distinct from water erosion when you look at some of these other structures. And so he came to the conclusion that the oldest parts of the Sphinx, like the core body, they've got to date back to an early period. And so his research points that was probably, again, the end of the last ice age. And if you look at the head of the Sphinx, it's much smaller than the body, especially if you're looking at a drone's eye view. It's got a tiny head. Why is that? It's because when the dynastics came, and this is a key word I'll use a lot, is they repurposed all of the stuff, repurposed. And that's why there's so much confusion, because the dynastics do have their fingerprints on all these sites, but that was thousands of years removed from the original builders. So for example, the Sphinx has had possibly 10,000 years of erosion, water erosion, wind damage, and the head was all eroded. So they came in and recarved it to look like a pharaoh. And that's why its body is smaller. So to answer your question, Alex, something happened, cataclysm, whether it was the global flood, whether it was the comet impact evidence, that's some of the strongest we have, that something happened, a global cataclysm around 12,500 years ago, I think is probably one of the best dates I can throw out.
And do you believe in the 25,000 year cycle of Gaia or evolution, and that, because they say that basically the Sahara, along with that human evolution cycle, that possibly the Sahara cycles between wet and dry climates every like 25,000 years, which could create something like that, right?
It could. Yeah, I haven't looked into that a whole lot, but that sounds plausible. Even the ancient Egyptian history, when you get into that, they talk about the cycles of the sun and the 5 cycles of the sun. There's
That's another thing the pyramids are actually built on, because they're aligned with the eclipses and the way that they shine through.
Yeah. So there was definitely some kind of cataclysm where I believe that, if you want to say golden age, that ancient knowledge, it was lost, and somehow the dynastics had fragments left of it, where they were able to do little things here and there, but for the most part it was lost. The energy was lost, and it's been slowly leaking out. But again, as far back as I think even the Greco-Roman times, we've got reports of the people back then going to these temples for fertility and healing. And again, today you can still feel energy at times in some of these places, again, which is why they're so amazing. They're so popular, right? But geology plays such a huge role in all of this. That was one of the big takeaways I had from our trip in a couple months ago. When you look at the Great Pyramid, I mean, it's made out of granite, it's made out of sandstone, and it's made out of limestone, right? And when you start to look at the different properties of these stones, you realize that they cause certain reactions. Again, so there's so much energy. And I remember on the first full day of our trip, we're walking around the outside of the Great Pyramid, and immediately you start to see all these anomalies. And one thing that really surprised me is, I'm so distracted with looking up that you don't realize how amazing just the floor that the pyramid sits on is. This thing is not just bedrock. It is white constructed stone that is megalithic, just in interlocking, just like you'd see in a Peruvian wall in Cusco. That's what the floor of the Great Pyramid looks like. I even took pictures of like 8-sided stones in the floor, interlocking, mortarless, megalithic. And then as you look close at the floor, this white constructed limestone, in places, it's bubbled over, and they call it rock crystals. And it got so hot. It was originally limestone, but it was exposed to such extreme heat and pressure that its structure literally changed. And so again, that goes back to the cataclysm that most likely took place thousands of years ago. So again, I know I said a lot there.
What about when we look at like sites like this in other places, right? Like I just came back from, well, not just, but like in the last year, Tulum, and and saw the Mayan pyramids, or one of them. And obviously there's other pyramids, right? It's not just in Egypt. Would you say the same thing about these megalithic sites? Like these were also, energetic or power sources, or do you see it? And I guess the other piece is like, is there a connection, or was it just like a consciousness that was able to like be, in multiple places at one time?
Great question. Yeah, there was definitely a connection. In fact, I created a video, man, a year or so ago, breaking down the striking similarities that I found on opposite ends of the planet. One was in Peru, obviously, but there's a site called Viscongo, which has these crazy megalithic walls with like these faux doors, 3 in a row. And it was crazy that in Italy, there's a site called, I think it's Massa di Alba. You can see a cyclopean style wall there. At first look, you'd think you're looking at Peru. And almost the same size and scale too, with 3 faux doors. And so clearly there's some kind of ancient knowledge here, right? And then I've been to Peru. That was a trip that really kind of got me into all this several years ago. And I mean, Peru it's literally a buffet of megalithic marvels. You've got the famous sites like Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, Machu Picchu, but then literally, I've never seen a place like that where there's some kind of megalithic structure almost anywhere and everywhere in that Cusco area. You could never see them all probably in one lifetime. But let's take Machu Picchu, for example. Other side of the planet from Egypt, right? The lost cities, they call it, discovered by Hiram Bingham in 1911. If you look at, if you Google pictures of Machu Picchu or see videos of it on YouTube, you're going to mostly see 80% of the time. And it's cool, but it's all the Inca stonework. It's small, rough stones stacked on top of each other with mortar holding them together. But what you kind of have to know what to look for, search for when you see there, when you go, is that whole thing's got a megalithic core, strikingly similar to what we see in Giza, especially the third pyramid. I'm blanking on the name right now, the third pyramid, the Egyptology name of it, but it's got the same nubs, as people call it, that you see at Machu Picchu and Cusco. And so again, if you go to Machu Picchu, you see 80% of the site made up of the Inca style architecture, again, which is cool. I don't want to take anything away from the Inca. They were masters in their age. But if the Inca made all this, as we're told, why in the world didn't they make the whole site out of the megalithic precision core? We're talking, 20-ton, 50-ton blocks where you can't fit a piece of paper through them. And the Inca wouldn't do that. That doesn't make any sense. We wouldn't do that. Why wouldn't they repair their megalithic core with more megalithic blocks? But that's not what you see. You see, again, kind of like I was describing in Egypt, you've got the dynastics repurposing this megalithic architecture. And in Peru, you see the same thing. You see the Inca and then the Spanish building on top of megalithic architecture that's far superior. One cool story from Peru, when I went there with Brian Forster years ago, he took us to this basically off the grid site, again, in the Sacred Valley, not too far from Machu Picchu. He took us to this crazy valley where there was some train tracks, and then we hiked up this mountainous, hill or almost cliff. It was pretty steep. And he says, we're going to a cave way, way up here into the mountain. We get up there. Again, this is a 30-minute hike at least from the bottom of this remote valley. Inside this cave was probably, again, because of where it was, the most incredible thing I saw in Peru. Again, in a remote cave, in a mountain, was megalithic architecture so precise it looked like it had been made with lasers. On one side was like this massive precision cutout, like a rectangle, but 3D in layer. And inside was this faux door, almost like it was a door into the mountain. And then on the other side, the entrance of the cave was what looked like, you could say, an altar or a console with these trapezoidal features. Sadly, the top had been blown off by later, troublemakers. But the fact that that was in a remote cave, hours and hours from society, nobody could have brought power tools up there, right? With cords. And then something crazy happened while we were up there. I mean, we're up there with a big group, and there was some kind of Inca type guide that was doing some ceremonial cleansing. And he was basically saying, he was telling everybody, you know, open yourself up to the energy of this place. And people are just kind of chilling out while this guy plays on a drum. And, you know, I guess you could say some people were meditating, some people were just enjoying the moment. But this guy in our group suddenly starts freaking out. And he's basically acting like he's in pain, he's in trouble. And so everybody gathers around him and we're like, are you okay, man? What's going on? And he describes how he says, again, this is according to this guy, he says that some kind of, I think he said panther or puma came through this this gateway, or you could say, or this portal. And I don't know if he said came into him or just came near him and freaked him out. But that was kind of the craziest thing I've ever seen in an ancient site, where a guy was literally freaking out and screaming and clearly needed help. So it was like, okay, what is going on? But I hope that answered your question, Alex.
Was he the only one that saw it?
What's that?
And he was the only one that saw it?
He said, yeah, I think he was the only one that said he saw this. But again, I don't think he could be making something up based on his reaction that was clearly like, whoa. So we were all kind of worried for him. But that's one of the things
sight. when you open yourself up to energy, if you don't have boundaries, or if you don't know what you're doing, you can accidentally open yourself up to all different types of energies. And sometimes they're not the nice ones.
Well, I've never been to Egypt, but now I know how I'm going to act in the first pyramid that I'm in.
On purpose, just to freak
I'm just
going
to see if I can like act like I'm possessed and see if what if I can put on a show for people. Wait, okay.
That's so crazy.
There's so much here, right? What's your? I don't know enough, and I don't know that all of our listeners know enough to like ask the perfect question for you. So the thing that I want to know is, of all the things you've seen and all the things you've studied, what's the thing that we should know about that we don't know about or that we don't talk about?
Wow.
And I'm sure there's more than one, right? Like, what's your favorite one to kind of, you know, if we were at a party and you got to share one thing that was just going to blow all our minds, what would that thing be?
Yeah. Okay, there's several. I can use this question up for a while here. Okay, I'll start.
I want to talk about energy grids next, though. So.
Okay, I can't wait for that either. So, again, going into my Egypt trip, I've known for, many years that I did not believe, again, that the dynastic Egyptians built the pyramids. They weren't tombs. It's obvious. I knew there was megalithic temples there too. But I assumed that, a lot of the other stuff, temples, obelisks, a lot of the statues were just, almost likely the dynastic Egyptian architecture. What blew my mind was to find out that's not necessarily the case. One site, and I would point to, and I could email you some pictures, or again, listeners can just search these sites I'm mentioning. In Luxor, Egypt, again, this is several hours south of Giza, is a site called the Ramesseum. And it's called that because it's the memorial temple, according to Egyptology, for Pharaoh Ramses II. And he lived in the 19th dynasty, ruled. So that was like 1300 BC, okay? So that's why this site's called the Ramesseum. It's a memorial for Ramses II, because they say they found the word Ramses in the walls there somewhere in the 1800s. And if you go to this site, you're going to see these. It's an incredible site. Again, the dynastic Egyptians were amazing in their day, and they should get credit. So I don't ever want to come off that I'm bashing them. But you'll see a classic at the Ramesseum, classic Egyptian dynastic architecture in that you see massive sandstone walls, sandstone pillars. They're all built in sections though, not solid pieces, right? And as you wander around the site, you start to see something else. And this is what Muhammad Ibrahim really helped us to point out. Again, if you have an open mind and you're putting all the evidence on the table, you see sandstone, which is a softer material than granite, okay? This stuff is cool, but it's all made in sections, and it's like the hieroglyphs there and the artwork's kind of etched in. It's a little crude. Then you see pure granite pieces. There is a 1,000-ton statue at the Ramesseum. It's the neck, shoulders, and torso. That's all that's left, and it still weighs 1,000 tons. What this thing looked like in its original form must have been mind-blowing, but it was crafted from one single piece of granite. Go ahead.
Just used as an energy conductor, right? Isn't granite? Am I wrong on that? I thought granite was one of the things. There's a lot of crystal. That's what in the megalithic sites, from what I understand. And I have very limited knowledge on this. I just really am fascinated by it. But I thought that it was granite or another type of like sheet, and like when it's in a pure, like smooth stone like that, that there's something about it being in a pure, like large, huge sheet that is used as the energy conductor with copper and I don't know enough to speak about
exactly.
it, but yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and we can get it into the energy part of it definitely more in a second, because granite definitely contains, especially the rose granite, which this statue I'm talking about is made of. Rose granite is the most pure form of granite. It's the hardest form of granite. It's reddish. That's why they say rose. It contains 20 to 60% quartz. So it's radioactive stone. And because of the ingredients, it can basically send and receive waves. So this statue is made of that. It's 1,000 tons. And again, I believe this thing's at least 12,000 years old, okay? But where you look at where it's not damaged, the shoulder, this thing's got muscle tone. The torso has muscle tone. And then it's got these 3D precision symbols, or you could say hieroglyphs, deeply embedded into its shoulders, okay? These things look like they were cut, again, I hate to use the word because some people flip out, but it looks like they were cut with lasers, right? And so then you go around the corner, and again, you see the sandstone statues that were definitely built by Ramses. These things are probably 30 feet high, but if you saw a picture, they're cut into sections, right? It's the best they could do. Sandstone, which again, much softer than rose granite, cut into sections, but then you see these pure granite pieces made from a solid piece. So again, then you go and you see that there's a bust of a head that was broken off. This was a smaller statue than the 1,000-ton statue, but it's almost a perfectly preserved head. And you look at the eyes and the ears in this thing, you can see the tool marks, again, of what looked like a laser cutting the precision features of this. And this was a greenish dorite, which is light granite, form of granite. So what I'm saying is you've got sandstone made in pieces, and then you've got granite, muscle tone, precision symbols. And at the base of that 1,000-ton statue, and I'll end here so I can get to my point, at the base of that 1,000-ton statue is this base. And this is the craziest part. And it's full of these 3D precision crafted sunken symbols or hieroglyphs. And Muhammad interpreted them, and they basically read the powerful system of the sun. I think it was chosen by the sun, son of the sun, Ramses. So my point is, my biggest takeaway from the trip that I think people need to know about, to answer your question, Alex, is as great, again, as the dynastic Egyptians of the 19th dynasty were, and all the dynasties, how could they have precision carved these symbols and made these statues of harder rose granite when they had softer copper chisels and hammers, according to the archaeological record? That is akin to cutting wood with a plastic knife. and why are the symbols seen like on the statue and in that wall far superior to, and people can go to Megalithic Marvels on Instagram to see posts and reels about this. I've posted them recently, so you'll see me pointing at one of these symbols. If you go to Megalithic Marvels, that's a good place to find, I guess, these pictures. But how could they precision cut those symbols, again, with their softer tools? And then when you look at other 19th dynasty hieroglyphs, like in the Valley of the Kings, you go into these tombs, you see 19th dynasty. It says right on the plaque as you're entering. Those hieroglyphs are far crude compared to the precision ones, right? So again, we've got a problem here. Why didn't they just make everything out of the precision granite and make it look superior with whatever tool they had? But the clear answer in my mind is it's two different builders. And so my point is, when you go to the Ram Museum or you go to Karnak and there's a bust of, or there's a torso of legs that look just like this torso, are we looking at actual statues made by the megalithic builders that represented them, giving us a glimpse of who they were? Are these basically the original ancient Egyptians that predated the dynastic Egyptians? And so basically, did the dynastics come along 10,000 years later or whenever, see these sites, repurpose them as theirs? Did Ramses II take upon the name Ramses because he read it in the wall and want to be great like him, right? And build his memorial around this golden age ruins? That's one answer. Thoughts on that?
Did you just see my brain explode?
I'm
loving this, but I'm going to let Alex.
I mean, look, I think for me, the thing that I'm most is like, I'm with you. Like, I don't think that there's any, there has to be another explanation for so many things, like the pyramids and things that you're talking about, like the precision, right? And I don't like, there's a part of me that's like, hey, somebody could have come here from somewhere else. Like, humans could have been brought here from somewhere else. And to your point, like, something could have wiped us, right? This could be the humans that we are today could be like a second, right? Like I mean, if you think about it, I guess that, look, global warming could like end our species as we know it, right? Not, and then hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years, another wave of humans could evolve. So I don't know. It's pretty wild. It's hard for me sometimes to think that it's like a conspiracy, that it's like this idea, when I think about the pyramids, if they were an energy source and we could replicate that, well, you could replicate it and figure out a way to charge for it also. So you could make money we can make money off anything. We make money off water, right? So if it's just about money, it's like, well, if it's free, then the person who builds it can sell it and they have no like overhead. But to me, it's there's something that we don't know. And that is what I love about when I look at your social media, is you're not like, hey, this has to be it. Like, I have to be right about it. You're like running around in curiosity, just like, this doesn't make sense. This, like, you don't have an answer necessarily, but you're asking us to think, and like, and you're creating hypothesis that we get to play with. And I think that in itself is really good for human beings, to ask questions and be curious. I think we get in trouble when we're like, no, it has to be right. Like, I have to be right about what it is or what it isn't.
Totally agree. Yeah, that is my biggest passion, is just asking questions. Because it's crazy. I found that if you come out and say this is the way it is, I mean, there's no way you can please everybody. I don't want to please everybody. The reality is I don't have all the answers, but I love asking questions. It's crazy though, even when you do ask questions, just the hate you'll get from a certain population just for asking the question.
Questioning. Yeah.
Just for questioning the narrative.
But do we, I know, and yeah, and do we really need to know? Like, I think people in general, and one of the reasons we're doing this podcast and why I wanted to do it is because I love this stuff. I love asking questions. But a lot of people are afraid of what they can't see, or are hesitant or resistant towards the unseen or the things that they can't understand. People want things to make sense. And as a meditation and, mindfulness coach as part of my background, I understand a lot about, I got really into neuroscience and like, how does the brain work? And the brain loves to categorize things and put things in order. And right, it's how it makes memory and becomes efficient. Or like a giant walking computer. And so I think that's why people do that and struggle with it. Like they want so bad to just be able to categorize everything. Their brain is like trying to do it, and they just, but we can't. Huh?
And just answer, if you ask, your brain has to have an answer.
Right.
It's right.
But we're not going to get one for a lot of this. Like we'll probably never know most of these answers, but it opens up so much just to even know, hey, there's so much we don't know. Like,
yeah,
that's great thoughts there for sure. One cool thing I'll share, before when we got to Egypt and we first had our meal together on our Megalithic Marvels tour, again, our guide and host, Mohammed Ibrahim, Egyptologist, and I think he's an author too, but he's known as the Guide of Egypt in a lot of circles on Instagram. But he was saying how, hey, once you walk through these temples and these pyramids for the next couple of weeks, go home and within a month, you're going to start to notice some changes in your life. And just one cool story about my friend who came with me. He, I was so busy and preoccupied with capturing content and video for Megalithic Marvels that I wasn't in the moment like, I wanted to be or should have been in a lot of these incredible energetic places. So I definitely missed out. But my friend Jason was just chilling, taking it all in. So we go there, and before this, he didn't know much about megalithic history. But man, he came back with a baptism of it. All that to say, he basically literally within a month after, his life really began to change in some ways with relationships that were struggling, were now being healed, talking years of stuff that he was preoccupied with, he effortlessly was able to let go of. And anyway, just being so close to him, even I was surprised. Like, what? You're not doing that anymore every week? Like, what in the heck? And so that was a firsthand example of really seeing somebody change in modern times. That was crazy.
That is wild. And that's actually a really common story about a lot of these megalithic sites that we're talking about. Alex and I heard a lot of them when we've done interviews for this podcast, and our future documentary, coming in the making documentary, in Mount Shasta and Joshua Tree. It's like when people go to these places, things just happen. It's like, must be the high frequency and the energy that's used in these areas. A lot of people call them high energy vortexes or portals, and things like that. But the truth is there's thousands and thousands and thousands or more of, years of energy and experience like layered into these sites from so many ancient civilizations. Right. And so the energy, obviously it's different there. And if they're using a different type of energy, or maybe, we don't know what's happened there over these years, but you can feel the difference when you step foot on those sites. And people always come away saying that they've had crazy experiences, life transformations. I don't know. I definitely believe it's possible.
Another cool, one of the smoking guns of a megalithic civilization or lost ancient tech or technology, if you want to say that we post a lot about on Megalithic Marvels, was the Aswan quarry. Okay, so this is a mind-blowing fact that might shock a lot of people. Again, a lot of people in America and the West just assume that, again, the pyramids were tombs and that the pharaohs built them. It's crazy. The Valley of the Kings, where all these dynastic pharaohs were buried, is hours away down the Nile from Giza, right? Even crazier is all of the rose granite that was used to build the pyramids. We're talking about inside the king's chamber, the craziest, coolest part of the Great Pyramid. The megalithic temples like the Osirian of Abydos and the Valley Temple. A lot of the stuff you see at Karnak, this was all quarried from one place, the Aswan Quarry, which, if I remember right, is 11 hours by car from Giza. Okay. So number one, there's the issue of how they extracted the stone, which I'm going to talk about now. The other problem is, how in the heck did they transport it 11 hours by car from Aswan all the way up to Giza? And they want us to believe that they did it by boat, floating them. Okay, so here's the crazy thing. You go to the Aswan Quarry, and if listeners Google the unfinished obelisk, they'll see one of the biggest obelisks in the world lying there. It weighs 1,200 tons. Mind-blowing thing to see. But when you start looking close at it, you start to see almost like scoop marks on it, okay, on its top. If you walk along its base, and there's another one behind it, which is the one I'm actually going to talk about. There's a smaller unfinished obelisk. When you walk along the base of these, guess what you see? Scoop marks. It's literally looks like, again, this is rose granite. This is not limestone. This is not sandstone. This is some of the hardest stone on earth was scooped out in 1 meter sections like ice cream. Okay. And there's a new reel that we posted, I think 2 weeks ago on our Instagram that features these scoop marks. Pretty mind-blowing, on TikTok as well. So you see evidence of, again, ancient technology. There's no way that the dynastics did this with copper chisels and hammers. Number one,
it's just not possible.
It would take them 1,000 years probably to make 2 scoop marks, right? Plus, this was done effortlessly. And when you look at the walls close, you'll see dark brown reddish lines that go down into these scoops. Okay, so it looks like that's evidence of excessive heat. Some kind of ultrasonic type tool was coming straight down the wall and then scooping out. I mean, you literally see these red marks, and then you see the scoop marks on the bottom. Mind-blowing. And so again, how did they get them then to Giza? For example, I did a little research real quick. In 2008, China made like the world's biggest industrial super crane. And guess how much weight it lifted? 20,133 tons. Okay, so how did the ancient architects move these monstrosities that are 1,200 tons, right? For example, the unfinished obelisk. So that to me is one of the smoking guns. One of the most mind-blowing things I saw was the Aswan Quarry, where you see, again, this unfinished obelisk, but then you see the evidence where they're scooping under it effortlessly. So crazy to think about.
Wow. I also really want to talk about before we have to wrap up this conversation, the ancient power grid, which was really one of the original reasons we got on this conversation. For those of you that haven't been, or maybe don't know the whole journey with Alex and I and the frequency shifters, this was originally supposed to be a documentary about the 7 earth chakras. We wanted to travel to these different megalithic sites all around the world and talk to people about all the same things we've been talking about in this exact episode. Like, why is it different? What is up with the energy there? Why do people have these crazy experiences? And, there's so many connections between these different sites. So we just wanted to have that curiosity, ask those questions. And I had discovered this map of the ancient power grid. They're maps that it often like looks like a globe. I think it might have been what you were talking about in the beginning, like it's split in different pieces. And then there's also like a snake like infinity symbol that goes through one part of it that ties in the chakras. So I'm actually going to try to pull it up. Is that okay, Alex?
Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen
Yeah.
for our video, right? We can do that.
Sure. I mean, we'll see. We've never done it before. We'll see what happens. I'm looking while you're talking and while you were sharing, I'm Googling at these, what you were just describing. How do you say it? The unfinished obelisk?
Yeah.
It's like so hard to, it's so tough, like in a photo, because it's so, you're not right. Like I'm so present. So like, if I was there, the experience is so different than trying to look at it in a photo where you don't have the depth perception of, and you just can't, it looks, you can still see it's the uniqueness and the smoothness but it's just different.
Yeah, and if you can see a picture, I posted one again on our account not too long ago where I'm standing by the edge of it to give it some scale, and thing is so massive. So that was definitely one of the coolest locations we visited.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
Did it go?
Yeah.
So this isn't the full power grid, but this was how they are basically like, there's the power grid, this massive map connecting people or connecting these ley lines. And then there's two main ones that they say kind of go through the center, which are represented by this, it looks like an infinity symbol. There's been a lot of research by too many people to mention and name here. But this is where we've got like the seven chakras, which as you can see, the fifth chakra, the throat chakra in the middle here, which is our center of communication, how we express ourselves, is the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx and Mount of Olives. So what do you know about this energy grid and how these sites might be connected? Have you ever heard of the earth chakras before? Like, did you know that about Egypt?
I haven't done a lot of research about the earth chakras. I mean, I've definitely done some research on the energy grid and definitely believe that there's some kind of global power grid system that the ancients were tapping into. And yeah, a lot of my research points at the Giza pyramids represent basically the center of this grid, just like kind of your illustration showed. So that is really cool. And I think that again is partly why we talk so much about the energy, right? The earth is most likely producing the energy, and the pyramids and these megalithic structures are tapping into that. And there's this harmony there. And so again, I wish I wasn't so distracted taking video so I could just take in the energy of some of these places better. But definitely believe one thing I do know is that these architects knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing from the beginning. Graham Hancock talks about how the Great Pyramid, I think, weighs 6 million tons. It sits on 13 acres. If you measure the sides, it's 750 feet long on each side. It's almost 500 feet tall. I think it's got 2.5 million blocks used in its construction. But the coolest part is it's not just big, it's precise. And this is going to answer your question, Corene. Eventually, the crazy thing is it's locked into the cardinal dimensions of the planet. Okay. And so what do I mean by that? It's targeted on true north. So it's actually within 3/60ths of a degree, I believe, of true north. That's incredible precision. And so the builders of the Great Pyramid, they also did something else crazy, is they incorporated into its dimensions the actual dimensions of the earth. Not to get too number heavy here, but the number 43,200 is derived from a key motion of the earth called, I think, the precession of the earth's axis. And basically the earth wobbles slowly on its axis at the rate of, I think, 1 degree every 72 hours. So this number 43,200 is a multiple of 72. Because again, the earth wobbles on its axis 1 degree every 72 years. So basically, if you take the height of the Great Pyramid, which is 481 feet tall, and you multiply it by 43,200, Graham Hancock talks about how you get the polar radius of the earth. And if you measure the base perimeter of the pyramid and you multiply that by 43,200, you get the equatorial circumference of the earth. So in short, for thousands upon thousands of years, through the millennia, through the dark ages when people didn't even know they were really living on a planet, the pyramid has encoded and basically spoken the dimensions of the earth on a scale of 43,200. So basically the builders gave us the dimensions of the planet on a scale defined by the planet itself. I thought that was pretty mind-blowing when I started to learn about that.
Wow.
I mean, basically, I feel like Stargate's a documentary at this point. And if people listening do not know what Stargate is, it's an awesome movie, first of all. But it's like from the 90s, I think.
I watched that with my buddy Jason. We were geeking out right before our trip. I think we watched it 3 days before we left.
It's
and
so good.
for the 90s, like you said, I cannot believe how great that movie was made.
Yeah. And it probably was. It is. But I mean, we'd be crazy to think if we were, I think that people that think that there is no other life out there are insane. Like, come on. We see how huge this universe is. And the more I get into things like sacred geometry, and we didn't even get into that today, the amount of sacred, you would reference numbers, but like the same patterns and shapes at those same ratios repeated in plants, in buildings, in human beings, in lakes, in mountains, in the sky. Like, come on, like there's something bigger. And the fact that then we find, like, it'd be absolutely absurd to think that there's no other dimension or reality where other beings exist.
I saw a channeler the other day that was channeling like another being, and that person was like, well, why don't the aliens come here then if they're like have all, whatever. And the channeler said, would you go to a place where everyone has guns and are crazy? It was like,
that's the best answer.
It was like the idea that these like other beings were actually super primitive, and other beings are not gonna come here like in the movies to destroy us.
They're just like watching us. No, they're probably up there eating popcorn. Like, aren't we the movie set? Like, they're like,
and
look at
the
these
idea
idiots
was
down there fighting over all this stuff, and like, they think a chisel did that? Like, they believe that?
Right, but we have this idea that like other beings would be violent because we're violent, right? So we map all of our stuff onto whatever else, because that's the only way our consciousness can work at the level most of us are playing at, right?
So, but I love people use fear to manipulate reality, but it's either one of the two.
This is awesome. And again, we could probably, I mean, I feel like we say this to everyone that comes on here, we could probably do like 10 hours.
Can we just do another season with all the same people from this season, but like just go again? Because
I
feel like we're cutting every conversation too short.
We could probably do a season with each person realistically, which is why people need to go follow, you and everything at Megalithic Marvels. The Instagram is that Megalithic Marvels. Is there anywhere else you want people to go? Do you want them to go to your website? What would you like?
Yeah, you can find us. I've kind of got several different things. We got the blog megalithicmarvels.com. A lot of more long form articles there people can read. That's kind of how I started, was just writing blogs. And then started the Instagram, which really took off. So you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We got a page and a group. Groups, a little bit more intimate. You can share stuff and ask questions. The page is, it's just more of a running page, but on YouTube as well. So yeah, looking forward to making some more short films coming up. I've got so much material from Egypt. It's like almost hard to know what to do with it. But my new goal is, aside from posting little short reels and stuff, is now to get into, again, 10-minute long videos, just documenting sites and asking questions. And also, listeners can, if you follow us, we'll be releasing hopefully soon, the next couple of weeks, information on 2023 tours. We're going to do Egypt again in May. And
can we do a frequency shifters tour?
there you go. Yeah, and then we're going to do,
well, we need to go to the pyramids anyway for our documentary, so
that would be amazing. Yeah, and then we're going to do a Peru tour hopefully in October of next year with Brian Forster. So that would be an amazing year to do Egypt and Peru in 1 year.
Wow, you guys have some incredible stuff coming up.
Yeah. So we're excited, man. There's so much. You go to on a trip like this to Egypt and you've barely scratched the surface, really. There is so much to see. You could go back 5 times a year and still want to keep going.
Yeah. I wanted to go for a long time. I was supposed to go a long time when then there were some riots and the issues going on there, and my trip was canceled by the airline, and I was really disappointed. But I realized I was supposed to wait until, this was 12 years ago. So I realized I was supposed to be where I am now with all the knowledge that I have to go and like really give it up its proper justice. So
yeah, I went in. Yeah, I was gonna say I went in 2008, and I went inside one of the pyramids. I had no idea what I was looking at. I had no scope. When I look back and go, what were you doing? But let me tell listeners, whether you come with us or another tour, going down the Nile River in a luxury yacht, drinking Turkish coffee, or I guess you'd say Egyptian coffee, in a hammock, there's no better experience than that. So that was one of the highlights of my trip last time.
That sounds awesome. These guys' your site is awesome as well. I mean, that's how I found you. I follow you on Facebook and on Instagram, and I was just constantly learning so much from you. You do so much incredible work. I don't know how you have the time for it all. So for our listeners, this is definitely an account you want to go check out. Follow them, explore, expand your minds. You guys are posting new stuff all the time that just blasts my brain open. So thank you for all of the time and attention that you put into it.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. It was awesome, and hope that we open the minds of some people out there.
Yeah, get people asking questions.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you again, Derek, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode of The Frequency Shifter Show.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Frequency Shifters. We really hope that you got some value, you learned something, and that there's something from this episode that you can take away and use in your life. Who are you thinking of right now that needs to hear this episode? Please share it with them. Share this on social media, subscribe and like and leave a comment. And please, if you have a comment or an idea or something that you want us to talk about or investigate, leave it online and we will go into those and bring you that information. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.